Mike Tyson made hundreds of millions of dollars and became one of the richest athletes on the planet. Today, only a small part of that fortune remains. So how did one of boxing's greatest legends lose almost everything? Let's break it down. Tyson didn't earn his money slowly. He earned it in explosions. During his prime in the 1990s, Tyson amassed an estimated $400 million fortune, earning around $30 million per fight. That's not a typo. $30 million for a single night of work at a time when almost nobody in sports was making that kind of money. By the time he fought Lennox Lewis in 2002, the numbers had gotten even bigger. The $103 million he earned for fighting Lennox Lewis in 2002, with about $75 million of that coming from pay-per-view revenues, was his biggest single payday. He lost that fight. It didn't matter. The check still cleared. Across his whole career, the totals are staggering no matter which count you use. Tyson earned around $413 million in fight purses across 58 professional bouts from 1985 to 2005. Some outlets push that number even higher. It's estimated that Tyson earned around $430 million through both his fights and endorsement deals combined. Either way, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars flowing through one man's hands before he turned 40. And Tyson didn't sit on it. He spent it as fast as it came in, and then some. At the height of his popularity and fortune, Mike Tyson owned 6 mansions, 2 white Bengal Tigers, and 110 cars, including garages full of Bentleys, Mercedes, and Rolls-Royces. 110 cars. Most people will drive 4 or 5 cars in their entire life. Tyson had 110 sitting around at once. The mansions weren't modest either. At his peak, he owned multiple sprawling estates, including a 52-room mansion in Ohio. 52 rooms. That's not a house. That's a small hotel. And Tyson had it built for himself while he was still in his 20s. Then there were the Tigers. Not one, not a pair. At different points, he had a whole menagerie of exotic animals, and the Tigers alone were a money pit on their own. He famously kept 3 Bengal Tigers, costing him over $70,000 each, and $200,000 annually in maintenance. $200,000 a year, just to feed and house animals that existed purely because Tyson wanted them around. The jewelry spending followed the same pattern. Impulsive, enormous, and constant. At one point, he spent $173,706 on a gold chain while visiting a Las Vegas jewelry store. The store owner, a man named Mordecai Yerushalmi, later described how casually the transaction went. He said he'd known Tyson long enough that he handed over the merchandise and trusted he'd pay later, as he told the New York Times in a phone interview. That's the environment Tyson was operating in. Money moving in the millions, handed out on a handshake, with almost no friction between wanting something and owning it. And it wasn't just objects. Tyson traveled with an entourage of 50-plus people, generously handing out cars and gifts, adding millions to his expenses. 50 people on the payroll, essentially before you even get to the mansions and the Tigers. Every single one of these expenses on its own might have been survivable for a man earning $30 million a fight. Stacked together, year after year, they built a spending habit that outran even Tyson's enormous income. And that's before you factor in what was happening in his personal life at the same time. Because the marriage that came early in his career took its own enormous bite out of the fortune. And it's where the real unraveling starts. Before the bankruptcy, before the debt collectors, there was a marriage, and it set the tone for how Tyson would handle money for the rest of his career. In 1988, at the peak of his fame, Tyson married actress Robin Givens. It lasted a little over a year. The stories from that marriage are almost cartoonish in how much money got thrown at small gestures. He only wanted the best for his first wife, and that included where she bathed. Mike spent $2 million on a bathtub for Givens. $2 million on a bathtub. Not a house, not a car, a single fixture in a single room. The marriage ended almost as fast as it began. Their marriage would last about as long as his massive fortune, and the two were divorced on Valentine's Day of 1989. The timing of that line isn't a coincidence. The marriage and the fortune both had short shelf lives, and both started running out around the same time. Other reporting on the divorce backs up how expensive it was for Tyson personally. Tyson's high-profile divorce from actress Robin Givens in 1989 cost him millions. Lawyers, settlements, the fallout from a public and messy split, all of it drained the fortune while Tyson was still near the top of his earning power. What makes this chapter matter isn't just the dollar figure. It's the pattern it set. Tyson wasn't treating money like something finite. He was treating every want, a bathtub, a chain, a tiger, as something he could just buy his way out of thinking about. And when the marriage collapsed, instead of the loss becoming a wake-up call, it became one more entry on a long list of ways the fortune kept shrinking. Because right behind the divorce came something far more serious. And this one didn't just cost Tyson money. It cost him years of his career and his freedom. In 1992, Tyson was convicted of rape and sentenced to prison. Legal troubles, including a 1992 conviction for rape that led to 3 years in prison, further eroded his wealth. 3 years is a long time for any career, but for a boxer, it's brutal. Boxers have a short window. Their bodies, their reflexes, their marketability. All of it has a shelf life, and Tyson lost 3 prime years of his to a prison cell. He wasn't fighting. He wasn't earning purses. He wasn't building endorsement deals. Meanwhile, the mansion still needed staff. The entourage still expected to be paid, and the tigers still needed feeding. When Tyson came out, he tried to pick up where he left off. Post-prison, Tyson's comeback bouts generated millions, but weren't enough to cover his mounting debts. That's the key detail. He was still making money, real money, millions per fight, but it was chasing debt that had built up faster than he could out-earn it. The prison sentence didn't just cost him time in the ring. It cost him the compounding effect of those prime years. The years when a fighter at his level should have been stacking the biggest paydays of his career. By the time Tyson was back in the ring full-time, the financial hole was already too deep for comeback fights alone to fill. And that's when the other side of the story starts coming into focus, because spending habits and legal trouble weren't the only forces working against Tyson's fortune. There was also the question of who was managing his money in the first place, and Tyson has spent years pointing at one man in particular. If Tyson's spending was the fire, a lot of people believe his management was the accelerant. And the name that comes up over and over again is Don King, the boxing promoter who worked with Tyson through much of his career. Tyson has been blunt about this for years. Mike Tyson has said that boxing promoter Don King and his 2 co-managers took over $100 million from him. $100 million is a fortune on its own. For context, that's roughly a quarter of everything Tyson ever earned in the ring, according to Tyson's own account of what went missing. This wasn't just an accusation Tyson let sit. He took it to court. In 2004, after Tyson sued King, the two reached a settlement of $14 million. $14 million sounds like a win on paper, but stack it against the $100 million Tyson says King and his team pulled from him, and the settlement barely covers a fraction of what Tyson claims was actually taken. Whatever the real number was, a lawsuit ending in an 8-figure settlement tells you something serious was flowing out of Tyson's accounts without his full control. Other reporting frames it the same way. Not just spending, but people around Tyson actively working against his financial interests. He says not all of it was his fault. Iron Mike blames boxing promoters and his ex-wife for unscrupulously taking some of his fortune and not looking out for his best interests when it came to his finances. That's a boxer, years later, still pointing to the people who were supposed to be protecting his money as part of the reason it vanished. Celebrity Net Worth's own breakdown backs this up in blunt terms. During his career, Tyson earned hundreds of millions of dollars from purses and endorsements, and he also spent very lavishly and was bilked out of a fortune by former managers and promoters. 2 forces working at the same time. Tyson spending money as fast as it came in, and the people managing that money taking their own cut on top of it. It's worth sitting with how this actually worked in practice. A promoter like King controlled access to fights, controlled negotiations, controlled a huge amount of the financial machinery around a boxer's career. If a fighter isn't watching every contract closely, and Tyson, by his own admission, wasn't exactly detail-oriented with money, that's an enormous amount of leverage sitting in someone else's hands. Add in the co-managers Tyson mentioned, and you've got several layers of people between Tyson and his own paychecks, each one potentially taking something off the top before Tyson ever saw it. None of this excuses the tigers or the bathtub or the 6 mansions, but it explains why the fortune eroded even faster than reckless spending alone would predict. You had a fighter who didn't think twice about buying tigers, managed by a team that, according to Tyson himself, wasn't fighting to protect his interests either. Both problems fed each other. The less Tyson paid attention to where his money went, the easier it was for people around him to take their share without resistance. By the early 2000s, these two currents, Tyson's own spending and the money taken by people managing his career, had combined into something Tyson could no longer outrun with comeback fights. The debt had piled up faster than the paydays could clear it, and that set the stage for the moment everyone eventually points to when they talk about Tyson's fortune: the bankruptcy filing itself. By 2003, the math had finally caught up with Tyson. The number that gets repeated most often is stark. Mike Tyson was once worth around $400 million, thanks to his boxing career, but the hard-hitting heavyweight was forced to file for bankruptcy in 2003 after incredibly frivolous spending. The debt figure itself has been reported a few different ways depending on the source and the timing of the filing. Despite Tyson's nearly $400 million earnings over the past 20 years, he somehow managed to find himself bankrupt with over $23 million in debt in 2003. By the following year, that number had grown. Reportedly, by 2004, Tyson was in debt of $38.4 million. The court filing itself laid out just how far things had fallen. Tyson also owed over $51,000 in back child support, and his assets reportedly ranged anywhere from $10 million to $50 million, according to the filing. And in total, the former heavyweight champion had $27 million of debt in his bankruptcy filing. A man who once commanded $30 million for a single fight was now behind on child support payments. Tyson himself explained the roots of it in his own sworn statement. "I have been in financial distress since 1998, when I was burdened with substantial debt to Showtime, taxing authorities and parties to litigation," Tyson said in an affidavit. "That's not one bad year. That's 5 years of compounding financial pressure before the filing ever became public." What makes the bankruptcy hit hardest isn't just the debt total. It's how little cash Tyson actually had on hand when it all came to a head. According to court records, Tyson was down to his last $1,250 in cash 3 months ago. A man who'd earned hundreds of millions of dollars was carrying around less cash than most people keep in a checking account. And the repayment plan that followed the filing was almost as brutal as the debt itself. The former heavyweight champion entered the ring in Louisville for the first of what could be as many as 7 bouts, in an unprecedented fight for financial solvency, with his largest payment of $4.95 million due in January 2006. Tyson wasn't fighting for titles anymore. He was fighting on a schedule dictated by a bankruptcy repayment plan, taking bout after bout just to keep creditors off his back. What's remarkable is how little the loss seemed to register with Tyson emotionally, at least in how he talked about it publicly at the time. He told reporters bluntly that thinking about the $400 million never crossed his mind, framing it as something outside anyone's understanding unless they'd lived his lifestyle. He pointed to other legends before him, men like Joe Louis and Jack Dempsey, who'd also earned fortunes and lost them, as if it were almost an occupational hazard of being a great fighter. His attitude was that he'd blown the money once and could simply earn it back, one fight, one left hook at a time. That kind of confidence is very on brand for Tyson, but it also glosses over just how brutal the underlying numbers were. This wasn't a temporary cash flow problem. It was a complete collapse of a fortune that had once made him one of the richest athletes on the planet, and it happened in less time than it takes most people to pay off a mortgage. Mike Tyson's lavish lifestyle led him to go bankrupt in less than 20 years after becoming one of the wealthiest athletes in the world. For a while after the filing, it genuinely looked like that might be the end of the story. A heavyweight champion who'd made and lost one of the biggest sports fortunes in history, closing out his career fighting just to stay solvent. But that's not where things stopped. What came after the bankruptcy is its own chapter, and it's the part of the story that explains where Tyson's finances actually stand today. After the bankruptcy, Tyson didn't have a boxing career left to lean on in the same way. Boxers age out fast, and Tyson had already burned through his prime years and his prison sentence. So the rebuild had to come from somewhere else entirely. It started slowly. Tyson took acting roles, showed up in television and film, and let his public persona, the mix of menace and unexpected charm that had always made him magnetic on camera, become an asset in its own right. Since filing for bankruptcy, Tyson has appeared in TV shows and movies, including The Last OG and The Hangover. Small paydays compared to a heavyweight title fight, but steady, and they kept his name in front of audiences who'd never seen him box. Then came the businesses. Tyson built a cannabis brand that leaned directly into his own history and image, rather than running from it. He is also behind his own cannabis brand, which has an edible option that pays homage to the infamous ear situation. That's a very different kind of income stream than a fight purse. Recurring, scalable, and not dependent on Tyson's body holding up in a ring. He also went back into the ring, but on his own terms this time, in exhibitions rather than title fights. Tyson even returned to the ring to fight former boxer Roy Jones Jr. in 2020, with the two earning $1 million each for the fight. $1 million for an exhibition bout in his 50s is nothing close to his old purses, but it showed his name still carried enough weight to draw a paycheck, decades after his championship run ended. The biggest of these later paydays came when Tyson stepped in against a much younger opponent for a fight streamed to a massive audience. That included the estimated $20 million payday earned fighting Jake Paul on Netflix in November 2024. $20 million, decades after his supposed prime, for a fight that had nothing to do with world titles and everything to do with Tyson's name, still being worth something to a global streaming audience. So where does all of this leave the fortune today? The estimates vary depending on the source, but they cluster in a pretty consistent range. Mike Tyson is a retired American boxer who has a net worth of $30 million, a fraction of the $300 million he was worth at his all-time peak. Other trackers land in a similar zone, describing his current wealth as built from a mix of business ventures, media work, and occasional fights, rather than any single massive asset. Some of that current fortune is tied up in property. In February 2016, Mike paid $2.5 million for a lavish mansion in Henderson, Nevada, a 1-acre property featuring a 10,400 square foot mansion, and today his Henderson mansion is worth around $5 million. Compare that to the 52-room estate from his boxing prime, and you get a sense of just how much smaller the operation is now. A single home instead of a small empire of mansions, tigers, and a 100-car garage. What's striking, looking at the whole arc, is that Tyson's second fortune looks nothing like his first. The peak years were built on pure fight purses, enormous, concentrated paydays that came in fast, and, by his own admission, went out just as fast. The current version is slower, more diversified, and built on brand, rather than brutality alone. Podcasting, cannabis, media deals, and the occasional exhibition fight that trades on nostalgia rather than his prime-era ability. Tyson has talked publicly about what he took from the collapse, beyond the dollars themselves. He's described the difference between going bankrupt financially and losing something deeper, insisting the two aren't the same thing. His framing has always been that if he built a fortune once, he could do it again. And in a smaller, slower way, that's roughly what's happened. He's not anywhere near $400 million. He's not close to it, but he went from owing tens of millions of dollars down to his last few thousand in cash, back up to a net worth in the tens of millions, built almost entirely from scratch after 40. The tigers are gone. The 100-car garage is gone. The 50-person entourage is gone. What's left is a business built around Tyson's name, his voice, and his willingness to keep stepping into a ring. Well past the age when most fighters have hung up their gloves for good, the $400 million is never coming back. Tyson himself has made peace with that. But the man who once counted his last $1,250 in cash during a bankruptcy filing has spent the years since proving that a fortune, once gone, isn't always gone for good, even if the second one looks nothing like the first.